Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Officer Cadet Jayden Wright. This evening, we warmly welcome the family of Major Trevor Russell Cunningham, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Major Trevor Russell Cunningham. Trevor Cunningham was born in the Victorian town of Coleraine around 1874, one of 5 children born to Alexander and Henrietta Cunningham. Alexander worked at Cheetham Salt Company in Geelong from its establishment in 1888, rising to managing partner at the successful company. Along with his brothers Andrew and Alexander, Trevor attended Geelong Grammar School. After passing his matriculation examination, he began working at Cheetham Salt. After his father and mother relocated to Upper Macedon in central Victoria, Trevor took over as director and secretary at Cheetham Salt. Trevor was an active member of the local militia. He spent 4.5 years in the voluntary cadets before joining the Australian Garrison Artillery based in nearby Queenscliff. Trevor qualified for appointment as a lieutenant in July 1897 and served with the artillery for 4.5 years. In 1912, Trevor married Bertha Ellen Fife and the couple moved into a house in Little Mallet Street. Trevor Cunningham joined the Australian Imperial Force on the 12th of May 1915. He was the second Cunningham brother to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force. His younger brother Alexander had enlisted in September 1914. Alexander served in Gallipoli and the Western Front before his early return to Australia in March 1918 on compassionate grounds, and was awarded a military cross in June 1918 for his service in France and Belgium. Signing his attestation papers in Geelong, Trevor Cunningham was allotted to the 7th Infantry Brigade headquarters as an orderly officer and aide-de-camp with the rank of lieutenant. 6 weeks later, Lieutenant Trevor Cunningham departed Brisbane in the troop ship Aeneas on the 29th of June, bound for Egypt. Arriving in Egypt in early August, Cunningham proceeded to join the Australian troops fighting at Gallipoli in early September 1915. He was transferred to the 27th Battalion a month later and promoted to captain in early October. The 27th Battalion had a relatively quiet time on the peninsula, sustaining only 54 casualties from the fighting in the final 3 months of the campaign. Trevor was appointed temporary major on the 8th of December 1915, 4 days before the battalion left Gallipoli. On the Greek islands of Lemos, Cunningham was appointed temporary second-in-command as the men of the 27th Battalion celebrated Christmas. On the 27th Battalion returned to Egypt in early January 1916 and spent the next 2.5 months in camps around the Suez Canal. Cunningham's temporary rank was confirmed in February and he was promoted to major. The 27th Battalion left Egypt in March 1916 and spent its first weeks on the Western Front in a quieter section of the trenches around Armentières, known to men as the nursery sector. Cunningham was granted a brief period of leave at the end of April and spent a week in England before returning to the battalion. After beginning in July in the trenches at Messines in Belgium, the 27th Battalion moved south into the Somme Valley to take part in the fighting at Pozières. The battalion entered the support lines of the trenches around Pozières on the 29th of July and was almost immediately exposed to heavy German shelling. On the night of the 4th of August, the men of the 27th Battalion prepared to leave their jump-off positions to attack and capture 2 lines of enemy trenches around a windmill. By the time they returned to their trenches the next day, the battalion had sustained 403 casualties, including 69 men missing in action. Among the missing was Major Trevor Cunningham. It was not until late September that Cunningham's fate was determined. Instantly recognisable due to his light-coloured breeches, several eyewitnesses reported seeing Cunningham wounded in the head by shrapnel a few seconds after leaving the hop-off watch. While there were conflicting reports of whether he had been killed instantly or lived for a few minutes, all accounts agreed that Major Trevor Cunningham had been killed in action on the night of the 4th of August 1916. He was 42 years old. After his death, Cunningham was mentioned in dispatches on the 13th of November 1916 for his distinguished and gallant service and devotion to duty in the field. Cunningham's remains were buried by his comrades around the Albapum Road. Although his grave was marked with a memorial cross, initial efforts after the war to locate his grave were unsuccessful. His name was initially planned for inclusion on the Australian National Memorial in Villers-Bretonneux Memorial in France, which lists the names of over 10,000 Australians who died in France and who have no known grave. In 1936, Cunningham's grave was located during exhumations of isolated graves around Pozières. His remains were identified by his identity disc, rank badges, and personalised gold cufflinks that had been buried with his body 2 decades earlier. Cunningham's remains were exhumed and reinterred into the London Cemetery Extension in Longueval, France. His name is listed on this roll of honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Major Trevor Russell Cunningham, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and for the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff, and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.